Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Shalom lekulchem. Hanechadim v'nechadot hanechmadim v'nechmadot. Today I'm going to read the story, another Curious George book. Curious George rides a bike. This is George. He lived with his friend, the man with the yellow hat. He was a good little monkey, but he always was curious. This morning, George was curious the moment he woke up because he knew it would be a special day. To celebrate breakfast, George's friend said, "Today we're going to celebrate because just 3 years ago this day, I brought you home with me from the jungle. So tonight, I'll take you to the animal show, but first I have a surprise for you." What could be the surprise? He took George out to the yard where a big box was standing. George was very curious. Wow! Out of the box came a bicycle. George was delighted. That's what he had always wanted. He knew how to ride a bicycle, but he never had one on his own. "I must go now," said the man. "I'll be back in time for the show, but be careful with your new bike and keep close to the house when I'm gone." George could ride very well. He could even do all sorts of tricks. Monkeys are good at that. For instance, he could ride this way with both hands off the handlebar. And he could ride this way like a cowboy or bronco, and he could ride backwards. But after a while, George got tired of doing tricks. And what do you think? He went out into the street. The newsboy was just passing by with his full bag of papers. "That's a fine bike you got there," he said to George. "How would you like to help me deliver the newspaper?" He handed George the bag and told him to do one side of the street first and then turn back and do the other side. George was very proud. He rode off with his bag. He started to deliver papers on one side of the street, and had been told when he came to the last house he saw a little river in the distance. George was curious. He wanted to know what the river was like, so instead of turning back to deliver the rest of the papers, he just went on. There was a lot to see at the river. A man was fishing from a bridge, a duck family was paddling downstream, and two boys were playing with their boats. George would have liked to stop to look at the boats, but he was afraid the boy might find out that he had not delivered the papers. So, even though he wanted to stay, he rode on. While riding along, George kept thinking of boats all the time. It was so much fun to have a boat, but how could he get one? He thought he had an idea. He got off the bicycle, took a newspaper out, and began to fold it. And then first, he folded down the corners. Then he folded them up and together and sideways in many ways he could. And then he gently pulled the ends open, and there was a boat. Look at the boat. Now the moment had come to launch the boat. Would it float? It did. So George decided to make some more boats. He used up all the papers and had so many boats he could count them whole at all. A whole fleet of boats. Watching his fleet sailing down the river, George felt like a captain. He was watching his fleet, but he forgot to watch what was going on. Suddenly, there was a terrible jolt. The bicycle had hit a rock, and George flew off his seat head first. Luckily, he wasn't hurt, but the front wheel of the bicycle was out of shape, and the tire was blown out. Oh boy, look at George. George tried to ride a bicycle, but it wouldn't go, so he started carrying it, but it soon got heavy. He didn't know what to do with his new bike. He didn't know what to do. His new bike was spoiled and the papers were gone. He wished he had listened to his friend and kept close to the house. Now he just stood there and cried. Suddenly his face brightened. Why? He had forgotten he could ride on one wheel. He tried and it worked. He hardly started out again. You look at him riding on one wheel. And then, all of a sudden, he saw something he had never seen before. Rolling towards him came a big tractor with huge trailers and with all sorts of animals. It was a zoo on wheels. The tractor stopped and two men jumped out. Well, a little monkey who can ride a bike, Bronco fashion. We can use you in our animal show tonight. I'm the director of the show. And what we'll do is we'll take you along to the place where we have the show. So there were three of them, got out into a cab and drove off. Maybe you could play a fanfare while you ride your bike in the show. I have a bugle for you right here. And later on you'll get a coat and cap just like Bob's. Let's see how he looks in the coat and cap. On the show grounds, everyone was busy getting things ready for the show. I must do some work now. Meanwhile, you have a look around and get acquainted with the animals, but don't feed them, especially the ostrich. He'll eat everything that they give him, but then he'll get sick afterwards. George was curious. Was the ostrich really eat anything? He wouldn't eat a bugle, would he? George went closer with the bugle, and the ostrich snapped the bugle and tried to swallow it. But a bugle is hard to swallow. Instead, it started making noise. Funny sounds came out of the bugle as the ostrich was struggling within its face, and George was really scared. He didn't know what to do. Fortunately, the man heard the noise, and they came rushing to the cage and got the bugle out of the ostrich's throat just in time. See how they took the bugle out of the throat. The director was very angry with George. We cannot use little monkeys. Why don't you do that as they are told? Of course you can't take part in the show now. We'll have to send you home. George had to sit on the bench all by himself. No one looked at him. He was sorry what he had done. It was too late. He spoiled everything, and he was so sad he was crying. Meanwhile, the ostrich, always hungry, had got hold of the dangling nearest cage, and this happened to be the string which held the door at the cage of the baby bears. The ostrich nibbled it, the door opened, and look who escaped, the little baby bear from his cage. He ran away as fast as he could and made straight out for a high tree near the camp. Nobody had seen it but George, and George was not supposed to leave his bench. But this was an emergency. He jumped up, grabbed his bugle, blew as loud as he could. Then he rushed to his bicycle. The men heard the alarm and at first thought George had been naughty again. But when they saw the empty cage and the ostrich nibbling, they knew what would happen. They knew that the bear escaped. And George called him to try to get their attention. George raced toward the tree, far ahead of the men, but now the bear had climbed quite high, and it was dangerous because bears can climb up the tree easily, but it's much harder to climb down. They might fall when they get hurt. The men were worried, but George had a plan. Let's see what his plan was. With the bag over his shoulder, he went up the tree as fast as only a monkey can, and look how fast he climbed up the tree. And when he reached the baby bear, he put him in his bag and carefully let him down so that the men could safely reach him and take him and put him to safety. Everyone cheered when George had come down from the tree. You're a brave little monkey. You saved the baby bear's life. Now you get your coat back, and of course you may ride your bike and play the bugle in the show. He was now a hero. Finally, the show was on, and how surprised they were, right in the middle of it, and also the man who old town with the yellow hat was there to discover George was on his bike riding in the show. They couldn't believe it. And after found him at last, the man with the man with the yellow hat, the newsboy, was glad to have his bag again, and the people from the other side of the street, whose papers George had made into boats, were not angry with him anymore, because he was a hero who saved the bear. When the time had come for George to say goodbye, the director let him keep the coat and the cap and the bugle, and then George and his friend went in the car. And where do you think they went? They went home. I hope you enjoyed that. Until tomorrow, we'll have another book tomorrow.